In Winter Haven, Florida, a tragedy unfolded, leaving a family shattered and a community in shock. Beatrice Taylor, a 25-year-old home health aide, has been arrested and charged with aggravated manslaughter of an elderly person. The victim, an 86-year-old man suffering from congestive heart failure, was entrusted to Taylor's care, but his life ended tragically under circumstances that point towards neglect. Imagine a life lived on the edge of fragility, where every heartbeat is a precious gift. Our story's victim, an 86-year-old man, knew this reality all too well. Diagnosed with congestive heart failure, his days were a delicate balance of medication, rest, and the unwavering support of his loving wife. Unable to care for him alone, his family sought the assistance of a home healthcare company, placing their trust in professionals like Beatrice Taylor. Little did they know, their hopes would soon be met with unimaginable heartbreak. The family, seeking to provide the best possible care, placed their trust in a system designed to protect and support the vulnerable. As the sun set, Beatrice Taylor arrived at the elderly man's home for her night shift. Tasked with caring for a fragile life, Taylor's actions that night would starkly contrast the compassion her profession demands. Instead of attentiveness, she chose negligence. The stage was set for a night of preventable tragedy. The silence of the night was shattered by a thump from the elderly man's bedroom. It was 1 a.m., and Beatrice Taylor, entrusted with his care, was jolted awake. The sound should have galvanized her into action. But instead of rushing to his aid, Taylor hesitated. The elderly man, his frail body racked with pain and fear, was left to suffer alone in the darkness. His cries for help went unanswered. Authorities allege that Taylor eventually stirred from her slumber, drawn reluctantly by the thump. She found the elderly man lying helpless on the floor, his eyes pleading for help. This was her moment to act with compassion, but instead, she chose apathy, leaving him stranded and alone. The flicker of hope in his eyes extinguished, replaced by the chilling realization of his abandonment. Taylor retreated from the room, sealing his fate. The weight of Taylor's inaction settled heavily upon the elderly man. He lay there, his body racked with pain, realizing he had been abandoned. Hours drifted by, each tick of the clock a painful reminder of his isolation. As dawn broke, Taylor finally stirred, but chose to engage in a lengthy phone conversation instead of helping him. 30 minutes that could have made a difference were wasted. Her actions were a stark betrayal of the trust placed in her. Finally, Taylor entered his room, but it was too late. His body lay still, breaths no longer disturbing the quiet. Frantic calls were made, but it was a race already lost. Paramedics arrived to find the elderly man beyond help. The tragedy was not just his passing, but the knowledge that it could have been prevented. Investigators began to piece together the events, revealing a chilling truth. Authorities launched a thorough investigation, revealing a shocking lack of remorse from Taylor. The autopsy confirmed the elderly man had died from positional asphyxia, a preventable death. Taylor, instead of expressing remorse, shifted blame. Her words, devoid of empathy, revealed a chilling indifference. She reportedly said, "He was old anyway, so what does it matter?" The shocking details of the elderly man's death sent shockwaves through Winter Haven. Sheriff Grady Judd addressed the public's outrage, emphasizing the gravity of Taylor's inaction. "The complete disregard for Mr. Anderson's life is outrageous," Sheriff Judd declared. He highlighted that even a stranger would have called for help. His words served as a powerful reminder of the need to protect the elderly. News of Taylor's arrest spread, igniting outrage and grief. The community, once tranquil, grappled with the reality of elder abuse. Neighbors shared stories of the kind elderly man. Candlelight vigils were held, symbolizing mourning and a determination to seek justice. The case became a rallying cry for change, demanding greater accountability in home health care. The elderly deserve to live with dignity and respect. As the investigation progressed, the weight of Taylor's actions pressed down on her. Her initial attempts to deflect responsibility rang hollow. The callous words she had uttered echoed in her ears. The legal system was prepared to hold her accountable. For the family, the pain of his loss was compounded by the knowledge that his death was preventable. Their home, once filled with laughter, now echoed with emptiness. Their grief was made unbearable by the haunting question, what if their world had been irrevocably shattered? In the aftermath of tragedy, the wheels of justice grind slowly but exceedingly fine. Taylor faced charges of aggravated manslaughter with a potential sentence spanning decades. The prosecution argued her inaction amounted to criminal negligence. The defense faced an uphill battle, portraying Taylor as inexperienced. The courtroom became a battleground, with broader societal implications at stake. The tragic case of the elderly man in Winter Haven laid bare a disturbing truth. The home healthcare system, designed to provide care and support to those in need, is often plagued by systemic issues that put vulnerable individuals at risk. This incident is not an isolated one, but rather a reflection of a widespread problem that affects countless families across the nation. Understaffing, inadequate training, and a lack of rigorous oversight have created an environment where neglect and abuse can flourish. These systemic flaws are not just administrative oversights, but have real, tangible impacts on the lives of the elderly and their families. The demand for home healthcare services continues to rise as the population ages, yet the resources allocated to this critical sector often fail to keep pace. This growing gap between demand and supply exacerbates the challenges faced by caregivers and patients alike. Caregivers, often overworked and underpaid, may find themselves ill-equipped to handle the complex needs of their patients. The emotional and physical toll on these caregivers is immense, leading to burnout and high turnover rates, which further destabilizes the quality of care. The pressure to cut costs and maximize profits can lead to shortcuts and compromises in care, putting vulnerable individuals at risk. This profit-driven approach often overlooks the fundamental human need for compassion and dignity in care. The case of Beatrice Taylor served as a chilling reminder that the consequences of these systemic failures can be devastating. Her story is a stark illustration of what can happen when the system fails to protect those it is meant to serve. It ignited a national conversation about the need for comprehensive reform within the home healthcare industry, a call for stricter regulations, enhanced training programs, and a renewed commitment to prioritizing the well-being of those under its care. This conversation is crucial for driving the changes needed to ensure that every individual receives the care and respect they deserve in their twilight years. The tragedy in Winter Haven reverberated far beyond the confines of the courtroom. It ignited a national conversation about the urgent need to protect our elderly population from abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Advocacy groups, long sounding the alarm about the prevalence of elder abuse, seized upon the case as a rallying cry for change. They called for greater public awareness, increased funding for support services, and stricter penalties for those who prey on the vulnerable. Lawmakers, prompted by public outcry and the heart-wrenching details of the case, introduced legislation aimed at strengthening protections for the elderly. These measures included mandatory background checks for caregivers, enhanced training requirements, and the creation of specialized units within law enforcement agencies dedicated to investigating and prosecuting cases of elder abuse. The case also highlighted the critical role of family members, friends, and neighbors in safeguarding the well-being of the elderly. By staying vigilant, recognizing the signs of abuse, and reporting any suspicions to the authorities, individuals can play a vital role in preventing tragedies like the one that unfolded in Winter Haven. As the legal proceedings continued and the calls for reform echoed across the nation, the family of the elderly man struggled to come to terms with their loss. Their grief, raw and profound, was a testament to the love and respect they held for the man who had been so cruelly taken from them. They remembered him not for the manner of his death, but for the richness of his life, his kindness, his gentle humor, and the unwavering love he had showered upon his family. They found solace in sharing stories, in keeping his memory alive through the countless acts of love and kindness he had inspired in their lives. And as they navigated their grief, they found strength in their determination to honor his legacy by advocating for change, by ensuring that no other family would have to endure the pain they had experienced. Their loss, though immeasurable, would serve as a catalyst for progress, a reminder that the protection of our most vulnerable citizens is a responsibility we all share. As the sun sets on another day in Winter Haven, casting long shadows over the now infamous residence, a sense of unease lingers in the air. This is the place where the elderly man breathed his last, a home now shrouded in mystery and sorrow. Inside the Polk County Jail, Beatrice Taylor awaits her fate, her mind racing with thoughts of what could have been. Confined within the cold, unyielding walls of the jail, she faces the daunting prospect of a life forever altered by the events of that fateful night. The weight of her actions presses down on her as she contemplates the long road ahead. Her trial, a somber affair punctuated by emotional testimonies and damning evidence, will soon commence. The courtroom will become a battleground, where her fate will be placed in the hands of 12 jurors tasked with determining her guilt or innocence. The prosecution, armed with a compelling case built upon a foundation of neglect and indifference, will seek to hold Taylor accountable for her actions. They will meticulously present their evidence, painting a vivid picture of the elderly man's final moments and the missed opportunities to save him. The image of the elderly man, frail and vulnerable, will be etched into the minds of the jurors, as the prosecution argues that Taylor's neglect directly led to his untimely demise. The defense, faced with the daunting task of mitigating the gravity of her actions, will likely delve into Taylor's background. They will seek to humanize her, portraying her as a young woman overwhelmed by a situation she was ill-equipped to handle. They will argue that she was a product of her circumstances, a person who found herself in an untenable position rather than a malicious actor. Her lack of prior criminal history will be highlighted as the defense strives to evoke empathy from the jury. They will likely highlight her lack of prior criminal history, painting her as a product of circumstance rather than a malicious actor. The defense will emphasize her remorse and the heavy burden she now carries. But as the legal proceedings unfold, one thing is certain: the elderly man's family will be present. Their hearts heavy with grief, yet resolute in their pursuit of justice, they will watch every moment intently. Their presence will serve as a poignant reminder of the life lost and the impact of Taylor's actions. They will bear witness to the legal process, seeking solace in the knowledge that their loved one's memory is honored through their unwavering pursuit of accountability. As the trial progresses, the courtroom will become a stage where the wheels of justice turn, slowly but surely, towards a resolution. The outcome remains uncertain, but the quest for truth and justice will continue, driven by the collective will of those who seek to honor the memory of the elderly man. The tragic case of the elderly man in Winter Haven serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of life, particularly in the twilight years, when the golden days of youth have long faded into distant memories. It is during these vulnerable moments that the intersection with a system often ill-equipped to provide adequate care becomes glaringly apparent. This story transcends individual culpability, shedding light on the systemic issues that plague the home healthcare industry, where overworked staff and outdated facilities are all too common. The urgent need for reform is clear, as advocates and policymakers rally for change, demanding better conditions and more comprehensive care for our elderly. The echoes of this tragedy will continue to reverberate long after the verdict is read, serving as a somber reminder of the consequences of neglect. As the legal proceedings conclude, it is a moment for reflection, prompting us to examine our own roles in safeguarding the well-being of our elderly population. This story demands our attention and action. urging us to become advocates for change and to address the systemic issues that plague the home healthcare industry. Let this case be a catalyst for change, a call to action to address the systemic issues that plague the home healthcare industry and to ensure that such tragedies do not happen again. Let us honor the memory of the elderly man by advocating for greater oversight, enhanced training for caregivers, and a renewed commitment to prioritizing the dignity and respect of those who have given so much to our society. We must strive to create an environment where the elderly are treated with the kindness and respect they deserve, in facilities that are well-maintained and staffed by compassionate caregivers. And let us remember that the true measure of a society's compassion lies in how it cares for its most vulnerable members, ensuring they are not forgotten or neglected. May we strive to create a world where stories like this become a relic of the past, replaced by narratives of care, compassion, and unwavering support for those who need it most. Let us work together to build a future where every elderly person can live their final years with dignity and peace, surrounded by a community that values and supports them. In doing so, we can transform our society into one that truly honors and cherishes its elders, ensuring they receive the care and respect they so rightfully deserve.